Welcome to the Star Trek CCG Set Chat and Pack Rack video series. I'm Mike Sember with Johannes Klarhauser, Dan Winterhalter, and Tom Target. Today we're going to be talking about the Mirror expansion for Star Trek CCG. Came out at the end of 2000, December 6, 2000, 131 cards, 40 commons, 40 uncommons. Then the distribution with rares is you have 20 rares and then the 30 rare pluses. And another ultra rare, the first Officer Spock in this expansion. Johannes, what did Mirror do for gameplay?
Mirror introduced the mirror quadrant. So far in the game, we have our regular space line, which is in the alpha quadrant. We also have the gamma quadrant. And now we have the mirror quadrant, which is, of course, its own universe, but in gameplay purposes, it functions like another quadrant. However, you cannot easily interact with the mirror quadrant from the alpha quadrant or gamma quadrant. You need a specific way that allows you to move between those quadrants or these two universes, if you will. Together with this new quadrant, we get two sub-factions that are at home in this universe. We get the Terran Empire, consisting mostly of the evil Kirk era guys. So we have James Tiberius Kirk, and we have Chief Engineer Scott and Chief Navigator Chekhov. So they are the evil twins. And also we have the Klingon-Cardassian alliance that we have seen in the Deep Space Nine Mirror Universe episodes. So this has Klingons and Cardassians and some Bajorans and some non-aligned that have these special faction icons. So we have the Mirror Universe dagger, and we have the KCA icon, and these are tied together by two so-called emblem cards, the emblem of the Empire and the emblem of the Alliance. And these allow these guys to work together, even though they might be from different affiliations. So they're kind of like treaty cards that tie them together. And since the Mirror Federation guys are also in the past, that means we also get another time location. When we talked about the trouble with tribbles, we had Sherman's Peak. Now we have the Halkan Council, which is a time location located in the Mirror Quadrant. And this is where our Mirror Federation guys report. And again, they will then have to find a way to first get to the regular space line, in this case to the Mirror Quadrant space line. But since there is only a very small number of Mirror Quadrant missions, actually, usually you have to go to the alpha quadrant or maybe to the gamma quadrant as well, meaning you also need a way to get to a different quadrant. So what we have seen in the past, that the game is getting more and more complex, is continuing here. And again, this might have been something where players have been lost, players that have never come back. It's quite a fun set because you have very nice cards. Probably one of the standout cards here is Bareil, the Mirror Universe version of Bareil Antas. He has a very useful download of any equipment card. So you can use this to set up various strategies. You can get an equipment that boosts the range of your ship. You can also do other nasty stuff with it. And he can be downloaded by a card or by two cards that we had in recent episodes, by Defend Homeworld because he has security, and also by Quark's isolinear rods because he has 2 computer skill but no officer. So the cogs are working together to create very well-tuned machines with some of these cards. You have super useful personnel like First Officer Spock, who has a great skill set and a very versatile download of any classic equipment. So we had personnel in Trouble with Tribbles that download a specific equipment. Now we have First Officer Spock who can download any equipment, which is a huge blessing. And something that is also interesting is that the Halkan Council is something that is to this day used in various decks to splash in as a mirror location that is used in Alpha Quadrant decks or even in Delta Quadrant decks later on, because it allows you to seed the ISS Enterprise. The ISS Enterprise allows you to download a Federation personnel. You would go for James Tiberius Kirk. James Tiberius Kirk himself has 2 more downloads, Classic Communicator and Tantalus Field. What do you do with all these cards? Nothing much. You just put them on the Enterprise, You bounce the Enterprise to hand with Space-Time Portal to increase your hand size, and then you cycle that big hand away to draw lots of cards and hopefully find a lot of stuff that you use. So there are very interesting cards to manipulate hand size, to draw more cards in order to set up either a very strong hand that you can then dump with a big report with crew, or simply to give you access to a lot of tools early on. So in a way, you play cards that you then remove from the table again, so shooting yourself in the foot, but it gives you a larger benefit in the end. So again, decks getting more and more complicated and complex, and probably more daunting to the casual player who just likes to play with some of the faces they know. And here you really then have a set that further increases, let's say, the gap between the casual player and the tournament players. I myself didn't play in that era when the set was released. I've only played it in throwback tournaments, but I can see how that changed the environment. Yeah, that's it for the moment.
And how about from a collector perspective? What did the set do?
So from a collector perspective, it introduced a fan favorite episode, or at least many fans' favorite episodes. And it again gave us a large number of personas of actors and characters that we know and love. So most of the rares are going to be folks who showed up in the credits of the show. And so there's a lot of fun as you dig through that, or the ship they were traveling on. There's a lot of fun as you dig through that, because they all feel like that's got to be a good one. They aren't all necessarily good ones, but they all feel that way. From a collector's perspective, you run into, this is the end of the original series specific, a lot of the original series specific cards. Going forward, we go into other property icons that are much more, or other properties that are much later in the show. But this will let us touch on some of the original series episodes beyond Mirror Mirror, as well as a lot of stuff from that one. At this point, the ultra rare is definitely the best thing to pull, but there's a lot of fun things you can pull as well.
I think the ultra rare is one of the cheaper ultra rares that one can come by, partly because the set didn't really have that mass appeal. In many ways, it's still relatively cheap to pick up by the box or by the case. So as a result, there are quite a few of them out there and available. Much like Trouble with Tribbles, there are one or two high value cards, but not that many overall. So on the rarer side of things, the ultra rare is your top pick, but you'd go rapidly into a James Tiberius Kirk or an ISS Enterprise or an ISS Defiant. As you'll see, there are many Federation personas back, both from the DS9 and from the TOS eras, which does create that imbalance of, I believe, 24 Federation personnel, once again, like Trouble with Tribbles, introducing more Federation cards. There's a few interesting ones for some of the other factions. Commander Charvinek, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Spock's love interest from the original series episode, is always in demand. She has an interesting ability with space line widths on certain individual missions, but is also quite a high skill card. There's a few others. We have the introduction of Esri. So we won't actually see Esri Dax come in until holodeck, I believe, but that was nice to see Esri here. We have a few dual affiliations with cards like Overseer Odo, and the Mirror Terok Nor does have some value, nothing compared to its original counterpart, but it's a nice double-sided card. And the Wayun of Borg card complementing the enhanced First Contact cards that we haven't talked about yet, but we'll probably do at a later time. We also do have the introduction of Jake Sisco, who, again, sort of another main character, even though not a massively important card. And something I quite enjoyed was the synergy between the Mr. Brunt, Mr. Nog, Mr. Quark, and Mr. Rom, allowing for the download of the subsequent characters upon the death of a previous, which is something you saw sequentially in the DS9 episodes set in the Mirror universe. When it comes to commons and uncommons, those are all rare pluses. When it comes to rares, the only real one of note, I'd say, is the Bajoran Warship. This is requires an alternate universe door to play, but it's the introduction of a Bajoran ship with statistics matching the other type of large capital ships that you'd see from the other factions. Plus, you're talking about a cloaking device, holodeck, and tractor beam, so it has all of the facilities, which is quite nice, and range 10, weapons 9, shields 8, makes it a very viable ship for the Bajoran faction. On the uncommon side, the Bajoran wormhole is is popular because, again, you would require 2 of them. It's useful for entering play, and I think in many ways it's often confused with the regular Bajoran wormhole for the DS9 set, so do watch out if you're after a Bajoran wormhole that you're getting the one from the DS9 set, not the Mirror set. And enhanced attack ship for the Dominion is another sort of Locust-like ship, which is quite powerful relative to its size in the show. So another high statistic, easily available you can have multiple copies of the same ship. On the common side, you do have the ISS Constitution, which in the same way we saw downloads of generic TWT personnel with the USS Constitutions, this allows for downloads of generic Mirror Universe personnel, so that's not a bad function. And the Battle Cruiser, which is a dual affiliation Romulan Klingon card that serves much the same effect, allowing for downloads of generic personnel in the same way. So that one often comes in for a bit of interest. So clearly the ultra rare is what you'd like to see, but there's a good chance of spotting a familiar face or two in this pack.
Great, and Johannes, you mentioned Brile and a few other cards, but any other cards you want to add from a player's perspective, or did you kind of exhaust the list before?
But there are a couple of other things that can be interesting. For example, Overseer Odo is in this deck, a dual affiliation Bajoran Cardassian, and he has the special download of Process All, which is a draw engine. So again, it's a card that you can download with Defend Homeworld, so you can easily set it up on turn 1 to generate an extra card draw. There is also Security Chief Garrick for the Cardassians, who has a very useful download of any Cardassian equipment card, so can be a pad for cunning, can be a gun for strength. Again, he has security and can be downloaded very easily at the start of the game. And there have been attempts at building interesting decks about the Mirror Ferengis, the Mr. Brunt, and so on, that all have the text, when he leaves play, may download Mr. Quark. And Mr. Quark says, when he leaves play, may download this and that guy. And there have been attempts at building decks that make use of this, killing one guy to download something else and then triggering other effects, but let's not go into too much detail here. Commander Charvinek is very interesting because she has the text where the neutral zone missions are then locked into a specific value, so you cannot score 60, or even if both players play in the neutral zone, more than 100 points from one mission. So she can be used defensively in that respect.
Yeah, a lot of familiar faces on the pack.
Exactly.
It shows up inside.
Alliance Cavort.
A lot of the Alliance ships actually have relatively high statistics, especially compared to the sort of premier sets. They've made them more powerful, which is again part of that sort of creep of stats and skills that you see in these sets.
Something else to be aware of is that this is the first set that they mixed the commons and uncommons. So you're going to get 2 or 3 commons and then an uncommon and back and forth, increasing the likelihood of a double in every pack.
Also notice the staffing requirement. So it's not the standard crew requirement here. You know, it's the Mirror Universe personnel icon required to staff that ship.
Powerful red shirt.
Yep.
A lot of Klingons.
Could be worse.
I think I read somewhere this is the set with the highest ratio of personnel and ships to the entire set. And you know, I love opening up personnel and ships, and here we are 4 for 4. Okay. This is the uncommon. Dan, you mentioned their mix, so this is an uncommon ship.
So I've had packs that have had 2 uncommons. I've had packs that have had 4. Always need an outpost.
Notice in this one, in the Premier Edition, the outpost is just labeled Federation Klingon Romulan. Here we have the addition of the word outpost, which is usually errated in in the modern era to the previous sets.
Might this be our rare or blue? I love playing this game with the blue. We want the first officer Spock, right?
Yeah,
Yes, we do.
Where's Chapel? Okay.
That'll work.
She's not bad. She's definitely in demand. It's a character which is obviously the connection to the franchise. Major Barrett appearing across multiple roles. It's just a nice one to see. So that's not a bad rare at all for this set.
Reports for free if McCoy or Spock can play.
Definitely a useful ability, yeah.
Agony. Always fun.
From a show perspective, this is one of my favorites. I absolutely adore the No J Consortium and the subsequent references to self-sealing stem bolts in future episodes is a lovely little part of DS9 lore. So I always appreciate that.
I capped my collection at 50 of any given card just because I have bulk. I get rid of more than 50 of anything except this. I have a gross.
Yeah, this incident is probably one of the key cards here because it allows you to report mirror personnel to the Alpha Quadrant once per turn. So you cannot do it indefinitely to churn out all of them at once, but once per turn you get an exception and can have one mirror guy show up. So you can splash in some of those really useful characters in a deck that is otherwise Alpha Quadrant based. And this one also allows you to download the multidimensional transport device if you can play one of the cards mentioned there. That is an equipment card that allows you to jump back and forth between the Alpha Quadrant and the Mirror Quadrant at the correct locations. So that's one way to conveniently travel across quadrants. However, this only works for personnel. It doesn't carry the ships along. So if you are then in the other quadrant, you still will have to find a way to get from one spaceline location to the other.
And can you remind me, this is a hidden agenda, right? With
Yeah.
this icon. And what does the hidden agenda mean?
It means that you seed or also play this card face down, so your opponent doesn't know what it is, and you only flip it at the time when you're actually going to use the card text. So you can use these things to play mind games because it might be a different card with a different effect, and you can have your opponent guessing for a while.
I believe this is a common, and I believe, in fact, that this is the common with the fourth one on the sheet because it's so necessary. Random Terran Empire.
Yeah.
Uncommon Klingon ship to go with all those Klingons at the front. Yeah.
And that's not a mirror Klingon ship. That is a standard Klingon ship.
Yeah.
So that's playable in a regular deck. If you needed yet another named bird of prey.
Back to the beginning.
You got no doubles. That's awesome. I find when I'm opening mirror, I get about I get doubles in about one pack in 3. It averages out on box level.
We were discussing this before filming, but in my mind, once again, a way that I think this set could have been much more interesting would be to make the Mirror Universe personnel, regardless of their natural affiliation, one common playable entity. You could have drawn from all the characters you've seen, maybe even had mirror versions of all of the missions in the premiere set or something like that. Just any way to make it a more interesting thing than just another dump of a large number of blue personnel and a smattering of a few others that don't really make that much of an impact. So I think that would have been fun, but it's still nice to see those familiar faces. And we were also discussing this sort of interesting interlude between the more expensive sets of First Contact, DS9, Dominion, and Blaze to Rules of Acquisition, Trouble with Tribbles, and Mirror Mirror, as opposed to the upcoming sets, which are going to see a substantial change in relative value there. So it's not a linear pricing structure. And when one comes to collecting this game or what you might want to play, it's not actually a terrible thing to have Trouble with Tribbles and Mirror Mirror still be readily available and and quite abundant, so that you can actually have people pick up these sets, get cards with characters whose faces you recognize that aren't setting you back a substantial amount to complete an obscure character from a rarer set.
One last side note, as a collector, Mirror is extremely available still at the moment, but it also is the most well-known for a quality problem. Mirror has an extreme bend on most of the packs that you'll find still available in the wild. The one you pulled seemed like it was pretty flat, but I've seen bends up to 3/4 of an inch from the edges of the card to the middle on Mirror cards. So, yep, that's common. Yes, it's fine. Flattening them back out by sticking them in a box with a lot more of them won't bend or won't show you creases. But yes, that's a very common thing to see with your Mirror.
There was a slight bend, but yeah, for the most part, they're pretty good. I mean, I really, I was looking at them and wasn't too noticeable. But yeah, there's a slight bend for sure. I think Voyager cards too, I've noticed that, and we can talk about them when we get to whether that's holds true with them as well. But yeah, these are, I'm looking at all the cards I opened, and there is a slight bend, and it is pretty good.
I think one of the missed opportunity, there's the Voyager episode Living Witness, which is where an alien race has portrayed the Voyager crew as effectively their evil counterparts for propaganda purposes. And although the Voyager IP is just coming up and it would have disrupted that kind of flow, I think that could have made this set also really interesting as well, to have this kind of mirror Voyager type crew members in there. Or, of course, if it was being printed later, we also would have had the Enterprise crew and their mirror versions could have made it more fun as well. So it's not unreasonable that they didn't miss that. I'm just thinking this is one of those sets that had real missed potential in how fun it could have been, as opposed to being one of the more mundane sets by objective standards.
A random note, they do have Mr. Tuvok in there from the Mirror episode in DS9 where he appears not having gone to the Delta Quadrant.
And let's not pretend that didn't make us smile when we first saw it. That was a wonderful example of continuity and logical positioning of a character, no pun intended, for their use at the show.
Well done, sir. I like the pun. So yeah, this was Mirror. It was kind of nice to see that the Rare Federation. We saw the Starship Constitution in trouble with tribbles, but seeing their chapel it was nice from my perspective. Again, the familiar faces, someone from the original series, and having a personnel or ship in the rare slot is something I always enjoy. And I'm very hopeful that we'll have more personnel, blue personnel, in the rare slot in our next 4 sets, because we're really turning a corner here. We only have 4 booster packs left open in our video series. This is Mirror, and we'll see you in the next set.